and the dead. Depart from the servant of God. It's the power.
Exorcist franchise, explained chronologically. The Exorcist has acclaimed a reputation that precedes itself. One of the biggest movies to come out of the 70s, The Exorcist has had an undeniable influence on the horror genre. Although it's a known fact that horror sequels never live up to the original film that blew up and started it all, the horror genre is still rife with sequels and film franchises. The Exorcist isn't immune to this treatment either. None of the Exorcist sequels can capture the magic and genius of the original. Still, modern filmmakers have tried their hand at the franchise and some have had commendable results. With Universal Productions greenlighting another legacy sequel to this horror classic, it seems important to look back at the series' past and understand its previous sequels. So, here's our video explaining the Exorcist franchise, in the correct viewing order.
Let's begin, shall we?
Number 1. Exorcist, The Beginning, 2004. Although it was released before Paul Schrader's Dominion, Exorcist, The Beginning was retooled from its other prequel counterpart because Morgan Creek Productions feared Paul Schrader's version would be unsuccessful at the box office. Years before Regan's exorcism, Father Merrin had had another run-in with the infamed demon Pazuzu. Traumatized by his experiences as a parish priest in World War II, a young Merrin suffers a crisis of faith and becomes an archaeologist in Cairo. He is approached by an antique collector to join a British excavation in Kenya to recover an ancient relic of a demon for him. He is joined by Father Francis, and at the dig site, he meets Major Granville, the site's chief excavator, Sarah, who is a Holocaust survivor and a doctor, and his translator and guide Chuma. He learns that the diggers are leaving in droves because the local tribesmen believe the church to be cursed. After a digger experiences a seizure, Merrin, Francis, and Chuma enter the church through the exposed dome. It is in pristine condition. But, the statues of angels are armed with their weapons pointed downwards, and the crucifix with Christ on it is upside down in a sign of desecration. Merrin decides to visit the site's lead archaeologist Bessayon, who had gone insane and was transferred to a mental institution in Nairobi. Upon entering his room, Merrin finds Bessayon with a swastika carved into his chest and speaking in the voice of the SS commander who tormented Merrin during the war. Bessayon slashes his own throat, and the asylum's warden Father Gianetti tells Merrin that Bessayon was touched by a demon, and not possessed. He also hands Merrin the volume of Roman rituals for an exorcism. Merrin returns and the evil in the village continues to grow, turning people against each other, causing a pack of hyenas to tear into a little boy, and his younger brother Joseph to enter a fugue state. Father Francis reveals to Merrin that the church was never meant to be recorded in Vatican documents and that it stands right over the area where Satan had fallen to earth after the war in heaven. As the digging continues, another temple is found just below the church. It contains demonic icons and other signs of Satanism. This is where Merrin first encounters Pazuzu. It is ultimately Sarah who is revealed to be possessed by Pazuzu. Her exorcism is unsuccessful and she dies in the tunnels below the church. As Merrin and Joseph emerge from the church, they find that they're the only two survivors as the others have killed each other. The film ends in Rome, where Merrin is informing the collector that he couldn't find the relic. However, Merrin is seen wearing his collar, suggesting that he had found something, his faith in God. Despite being an attempt to improve on a film that had already been shot, Exorcist, The Beginning falls victim to cliché and is ultimately a perfectly mediocre horror film. Number 2, Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist, 2005. Before we go further, please consider subscribing to us. It may be a small click from you, but it goes a long way for us. Let's continue. The setup for Dominion is similar to Exorcist, The Beginning. Merrin is traumatized by the war and has taken up archaeology in the Turkana region of British Kenya, where he is excavating a Byzantine church. He is joined by Father Francis, Major Granville, Dr. Rachel, Sarah's replacement, Chuma, and an enthusiastic convert called Emekwi. He also meets a disabled young outcast named Che and brings him to Rachel for treatment. Merrin and Francis note that the church is in pristine condition. Once the door is uncovered, Merrin, Francis and Chuma enter the church and through a hidden passageway enter a crypt containing a demonic idol. Marin concludes that the church was built to seal this temple. 2 British soldiers attempt to loot the church and are found dead the next day. Local warrior Jomo testifies that the 2 were affected by a strange madness. Granville, however, blames the Turkana and demands they give up the perpetrators. He goes so far as to shoot a woman when the locals protest. In retaliation, Jomo slaughters Francis' students, Emekwe's 2 sons, and is consequently shot by British soldiers. Francis realizes that Chesh's recovery is unusual and takes him to the church along with Rachel to baptize him, but the demon inside Cheche attacks them. Meanwhile, Granville commits suicide and local elders demand the church be reburied and Francis and Cheche be handed over to be killed. Cheche transforms into an androgynous perfect being as an earthquake seals the church's entrance. The next day, Marin finds Francis' arrow-ridden naked body tied to a tree. A dying Francis hands over the responsibility of exorcising Cheche to Marin. Marin dons Francis' vestments and enters the church. The demon offers him a chance to rewrite the past. He finds himself in 1944 Holland and refuses to cooperate, leading to the death of all villagers including himself. The demon mocks the futility of Marin's attempt as its influence causes violence to take over the Turkana and British soldiers. Marin performs the exorcism and it eventually succeeds as Cheche regresses to his former condition. Life in Duratai returns to normal and the British troops leave. However, a local elder warns that the demon will now pursue Marin, who has regained his faith and is moving back to Rome. Dominion is hands down the better prequel. While it's not a masterpiece, Dominion emphasizes spiritual agony over horror ecstasy, while paying occasional lip service to the need for scares. This allows the film to stand the test of time. In fact, it may have grown stronger with age. Number 3. The Exorcist, 1973. The film that started it all, and the best one within the franchise, The Exorcist is based on the similarly named novel by its screenwriter William Peter Blatty. Recently separated, actress Chris McNeil temporarily moves to Georgetown, with her even-keeled daughter Regan for a film shoot. During their first few days in the new house, Chris hears noises from the attic and Regan makes an imaginary friend, Captain Howdy. Regan begins exhibiting unusual behavior such as hyperactivity, swearing, lying and lack of concentration. Dr. Klein blames Regan's behavior on stress from separation from her father, but Chris begins believing there is more at play when Regan exhibits abnormal strength and Chris' friend Burke Dennings is found dead just below Regan's window. As homicide detective William Kinderman takes up the case, even he seeks out priest Damien Karras to make sense of Dennings' death. Regan's condition worsens, her body becomes covered in sores and there is an incident where she stabs herself in the genitals. Chris becomes sure of Regan being possessed when she turns her head backwards and speaks in Dennings' voice. Father Damien Karras is called and during their meetings, Regan claims to be the devil himself. Karras is on the fence, but when the words, "Help me," materialize on Regan's skin an exorcism is scheduled. Father Marin leads the exorcism with Karras' assistance. The demon verbally attacks Karras over his loss of faith and guilt over his mother's death. Marin decides to perform the exorcism alone. Upon re-entering the room, Karras finds Marin dead. Following Karras' violent demands, the demon rips the St. Joseph medallion from Karras' neck and possesses him. A possessed Karras hurls himself out the window and dies. Chris hands Karras' medallion to Father Dyer and leaves the city with Regan. In the 2000s director's cut, Father Dyer hands the medallion back to Chris and suggests she keep it. While walking away, he comes across Detective Kinderman and the two begin developing a friendship. The Exorcist is the embodiment of pure cinematic terror and a frontal assault on the audience's senses and intellect. Number 4. Exorcist II, The Heretic, 1977. After a failed exorcism where the girl being exorcised gets burned alive, priest Philip Lamont is sent to investigate Father Marin's death. It's been 4 years since Marin was killed while exorcising the Assyrian demon Pazuzu from Regan. Regan now stays in New York City with her guardian Sharon Spencer and is monitored at a psychiatric institute by Dr. Jean Tuscan, who believes Regan's memories of Georgetown are repressed. Father Lamont reaches the institute to question Regan but is rebuffed by Dr. Tuscan. In an attempt to plumb Regan's memories, Tuscan hypnotizes her and synchronizes their brainwaves through a machine called synchronizer. Meanwhile, Father Lamont receives a tour of the Georgetown house from Sharon. Lamont returns to New York to be linked to Regan via the synchronizer. Lamont is spirited to the past by Pazuzu to witness the exorcism of a boy named Kakumo by Marin in Africa. Lamont journeys to Africa in search of Kakumo since the boy had developed powers to fight off Pazuzu. Kakumo informs Lamont that Pazuzu attacks people with psychic abilities. Regan displays psychic abilities when she telepathically helps an autistic girl to speak. Lamont returns to the Georgetown house with Regan, while being discreetly followed by Sharon and Tuscan. En route, Pazuzu tries to tempt Lamont as a Regan doppelganger, and in the chaos, the taxi crashes into the house and the driver dies instantly. The four enter the house, and Sharon sets herself on fire while Regan and Lamont manage to kill and banish Pazuzu along with his locust swarm form using a bull roarer ritual. Sharon dies and Lamont and Regan leave while Tuscan stays back to answer police questions. While The Exorcist is a horror classic, this sequel was underwhelming at best. It proved to be a critical disappointment, probably because it didn't feature most of the creative team that was crucial to the success of the first film. The Exorcist 3, Legion, 1990. The Exorcist 3 is an adaptation of William Peter Blatty's Exorcist novel Legion. Set 17 years after the original film, Exorcist 3 completely ignores the events of Exorcist 2, and we can't fault it for doing so. In 1990, we witness Father Dyer and Kinderman reminiscing about Father Karras, who had died during Regan's exorcism. The following night, in a church, a crucifix comes to life as demonic growls are heard and trash from the street comes hurling into the holy establishment. The film cuts to a man walking the streets speaking of dreams of a rose and falling down a long flight of stairs. The next day, Kinderman investigates the murder of a 12-year-old boy, Thomas Kintry. Another murder follows and Father Dyer is found decapitated. He is rushed to the hospital, but he dies the next day. The words, "It's a Wonderful Life," are written on a wall in Dyer's blood. The fingerprints at the crime scene do not match, indicating a different suspect for each murder. However, Kinderman finds similarities with the victims of the Gemini Killer, a serial killer who had been executed 15 years ago. Both dead bodies had their right index finger cut off and the Gemini zodiac sign carved into their left palm. Moreover, Gemini Killer also added an additional L to words in his notes. Kinderman visits the head of a psychiatry ward, Dr. Temple, to discuss one of his patients. The patient was found wandering the streets 15 years ago suffering from amnesia. Since then he has been catatonic until he became violent one day, claiming to be the Gemini Killer. The patient turns out to be Karras, who has no recollection of his original identity and continues to boast about killing Dyer. That night, a nurse is murdered and Dr. Temple commits suicide. In his next visit, Kinderman learns that the Gemini Killer is possessing Karras with the help of Pazuzu, who is exacting revenge on Karras for exorcising it out of Regan's body. The Gemini Killer possesses a different patient each night to commit murders. He possesses an old woman to attack Kinderman at his house, but Father Paul Morning intervenes by performing an exorcism on Karras at the hospital. In the final showdown between Kinderman and a possessed Karras, the priest begs Kinderman to shoot him. Kinderman does as asked, thereby freeing Karras from both the Gemini Killer and Pazuzu. The film ends with Kinderman standing over Karras' grave, which lists his year of death as 1975. While Exorcist 3 may not have the visceral impact of the first film, it still manages to create a thick sense of dread that stays with you. It is a restrained, haunting chiller that no doubt stimulated the adrenaline as any horror movie should, but also stimulates the intellect. Future of the franchise. The Exorcist franchise still continues to expand. Universal Pictures is developing an all-new trilogy of films to the Exorcist universe. The first film of the trilogy is slated to release sometime in late 2023. It will star Oscar-nominated Hamilton actor Leslie Odom Jr. as the father of a possessed child. Apparently, he will reach out to Chris McNeil, Regan's mother from the original Exorcist, for help.
Time to give the people what they want.
That's all for this video. Are you excited for the upcoming Exorcist trilogy, or do you think the franchise should just be left alone? Let us know in the comments and stick around for more exciting content. Stay safe, and have a good one.